The dense jungle of the Amazon was a world unto itself, where the canopy of trees wove an almost impenetrable shield over the ancient tribes that called it home. This was the land of the fierce warrior women, known as the Amazon tribes. For centuries, they thrived, mastering the art of survival in the thick, untamed wilderness. Their knowledge of nature, their ability to navigate the rivers, and their deep spiritual connection with the elements made them formidable. At the heart of the Amazons' strength was their leader, Queen Zera. She was a tall and proud warrior, her skin a dark bronze that gleamed in the sun. Her eyes burned with an intensity that mirrored the fire of the gods. Under her leadership, the tribes had grown stronger and more united, but whispers of an old legend began to stir among her people, whispers of creatures dwelling beneath the rivers. In the depths of the Amazon River and its tributaries, another world thrived. Beneath the surface, far from human eyes, was the hidden kingdom of the mermaids. Known to themselves as the Taimana, they were as beautiful as they were dangerous. Their skin shimmered with the colors of the sea, scales as delicate as pearls, and their hair flowed like rivers of silk. Yet, their beauty masked a power far beyond the understanding of mortal men or women. They controlled the waters, summoning its currents, and could communicate with the creatures that dwelled in the depths. The Amazons and the Taimana had lived in an uneasy truce for millennia, each aware of the other's presence but avoiding contact. The river, which was the lifeblood of the Amazon tribes, was also the sacred home of the mermaids. Yet, as the human population expanded deeper into the forest, and resources became scarce, conflict became inevitable. It all started on a humid morning when the Amazons discovered their sacred fish traps, placed carefully along the riverbank, had been destroyed. The river had always provided sustenance for the tribe, but now their people were going hungry. Queen Zera gathered her council to investigate the matter. Tracks of unfamiliar creatures had been found along the water's edge, and the elders whispered of mermaid sightings. "Do you believe it was them?" Zera asked, standing over the shattered remains of their fishing tools, her voice low and dangerous. One of the elders, an old woman named Sola, nodded slowly. Her grey hair was woven with vines, and her face was etched with wisdom. "The Taimana are protectors of the river. They must see our presence here as a threat." Queen Zera's jaw clenched. The Amazons had always respected the river, never taking more than they needed. But now, faced with the possibility of starvation, Zera knew that something had to change. "We must speak with them," Zera said finally. "If they will not reason with us, we will have no choice but to defend our right to the river." But reaching the mermaids was no simple task. They did not dwell on land, and no Amazon had ever ventured into their underwater realm. Zera, though, was determined to find a way. She summoned her most trusted warriors, including her younger sister, Kyra, who was as fierce and skilled in battle as Zera herself. Together, they would make contact with the mermaids and, if necessary, fight to protect their people. As night fell, the Amazons gathered at the edge of the river. The air was thick with tension as Zera and her warriors prepared to call out to the Taimana. The river shimmered under the moonlight, its surface as calm as glass. Zera stood tall, her voice echoing over the still water. "Taimana, creatures of the deep, we call upon you. Come forth, and let us speak." For a moment, nothing stirred. The river remained eerily still, and Zera wondered if the legends were nothing but old stories. But then, the surface of the water rippled. Slowly, a figure emerged from the depths, her skin glowing with an otherworldly light. She was unlike anything Zera had ever seen. The mermaid's long, silvery hair flowed around her, and her eyes were the color of the deepest oceans. Her tail shimmered with scales of blue and green, each one catching the moonlight. She gazed at Zera with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "I am Nyla, daughter of the sea and protector of the river," the mermaid spoke, her voice melodic but sharp. "Why have you disturbed our waters?" Zerah stepped forward, unafraid. Our traps have been destroyed. Our people are starving. We have always respected the river, but it seems you no longer respect us. Nyla's eyes narrowed. The river belongs to the Taimana. You have taken too much. You poison our waters with your presence. We protect the balance of life here, and your greed threatens it. We are not greedy. Kyra shouted, stepping beside her sister. We take only what we need to survive. Need. Nyla's voice rose in anger, the water around her swirling. You humans think only of yourselves. The river has suffered because of you. If you do not leave, the waters will rise, and we will drown your tribe in the flood. Zerah felt the tension rise, her hand instinctively reaching for her spear. We have lived beside this river for generations. We will not leave. If you declare war on us, we will fight. Nyla's eyes gleamed with fury. Then war it shall be. The next morning, the air in the village was thick with tension. Word had spread quickly that the mermaids had declared war, and the Amazon warriors prepared for battle. The forest echoed with the sounds of sharpening blades, the rhythmic thuds of arrows being carved, and the low murmur of battle chants. Queen Zerah stood before her warriors, her eyes hard and determined. She was no stranger to war, but this battle would be unlike any other. The Taimana were not human enemies, they were mystical beings with control over the river and its creatures. Defeating them would take more than physical strength. It would require cunning, strategy, and the favor of the spirits. Prepare yourselves. Zerah's voice rang out across the gathering of warriors. We fight not just for our survival, but for the right to protect our land, our people, and our future. The Taimana may command the waters, but we command the land. We will not be driven from our home. The warriors raised their weapons in unison, their battle cry echoing through the trees. Zerah's sister, Kyra, stood beside her, her spear glinting in the sunlight. Though she was younger, Kyra was one of the fiercest fighters in the tribe, known for her speed and precision. Do you think we can win this? Kyra asked, her voice low enough so only Zerah could hear. Zerah glanced at her sister, her expression unreadable. I don't know. But we cannot show weakness. We will fight until our last breath. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of the river, Nyla swam among her people. The underwater kingdom of the Taimana was a breathtaking sight. Coral palaces stood tall, their colors glowing with bioluminescent light, and schools of fish darted between the structures. But despite its beauty, there was an unmistakable air of unease. Nyla floated before her council, the elders of the mermaids who had governed their society for centuries. Their shimmering tails swayed in the gentle currents, but their eyes were filled with worry. Are you sure about this? Nyla asked one of the elders, a mermaid with scales the color of the ocean at dawn. War with the Amazons is dangerous. They are not like the other creatures of the land. They are strong, relentless. Nyla's gaze hardened. They have poisoned our waters. They take without care, without balance. If we do nothing, the river will die, and with it, our people. We cannot allow that to happen. One of the younger mermaids, with a curious blend of green and silver scales, spoke up hesitantly. But do we need to fight? Could we not negotiate? Nyla has already spoken to them, an elder interrupted sharply. And they have chosen war. They are stubborn as they are deadly. We must prepare. Nyla, though confident in her decision, felt a flicker of doubt. She knew the Amazons were not to be underestimated. They were fierce, skilled warriors who had lived in harmony with the jungle for generations. But the river was their lifeblood, and if the Amazons continued to infringe upon it, there would be no future for the Taimana. Let us not forget our strength, Nyla said, her voice steady. We are the keepers of the river, the daughters of the sea. We have powers they cannot even comprehend. If they wish to fight, we will show them the fury of the water. With that, the council dispersed, each mermaid going to prepare for the coming conflict. Nyla, though outwardly calm, swam deeper into the heart of the river, where the waters grew darker and colder. She needed guidance, and there was only one being who could give it to her, the guardian of the depths. That night, the Amazon village lay silent, but the warriors did not sleep. Zera stood on the riverbank, gazing out at the dark, swirling water. The jungle was alive with the sounds of insects and distant animals, but the river was unnervingly quiet. She had no doubt that the Taimana were watching, waiting. Kyra approached her sister quietly. "The warriors are ready," she said. "But there's something else." Zera turned, her brow furrowed. "What is it?" "Some of the elders have been whispering. They say we should seek the help of the river spirits. That we can't fight the Taimana alone." Zera sighed. The Amazons had always respected the spirits of the forest and the river, but they were practical people. They relied on their own strength, not on the whims of gods. Still, the Taimana were not like any enemy they had faced before. "I will speak with the shaman," Zera said finally. "If the spirits can aid us, then we will need their help." Deep beneath the river, Nyla approached the guardian's lair. The water here was thick and cold, and even the bravest of mermaids dared not venture too close. The guardian was an ancient being, older than the river itself, and it was said that she could see the past, present, and future all at once. As Nyla swam closer, she saw the guardian's form begin to emerge from the darkness. Her body was immense, a swirling mass of water and scales that seemed to blend into the very currents of the river. Her eyes, glowing with a deep blue light, locked onto Nyla. "You seek my guidance, daughter of the river," the guardian's voice echoed through the water, sending ripples through the depths. "Yes, great one," Nyla replied, bowing her head respectfully. "The Amazons have declared war. We are preparing to fight, but I need to know if we will succeed." The guardian's eyes narrowed, her gaze piercing through Nyla. "War is a dangerous path, child. The future is not set. But I can tell you this, the Amazons are not your only enemies." Nyla frowned. "What do you mean?" "There is a darkness in the water," the guardian said slowly. "A force that stirs beneath the surface. If you are not careful, it will consume both the Taimana and the Amazons. You must tread carefully, Nyla. The battle ahead is not just between you and the humans. There are greater forces at play." Nyla's heart raced as the guardian's words sank in. A darkness in the water. What could it be? But before she could ask more, the guardian began to fade back into the shadows, her final words lingering in the water. "Beware the deep, daughter of the river. Beware what lies beneath." Back on land, Zera stood before the village shaman, an old woman with eyes clouded by age but sharp with wisdom. The shaman sat before a fire, her hands weaving symbols into the smoke. "The river spirits are restless," the shaman said quietly. "They do not like this war. They do not like the blood that will be spilled." Zera knelt before her, her hands resting on her knees. "I need their help. The Taimana are powerful, but we cannot let them drive us from our land." The shaman was silent for a moment, her eyes lost in the smoke. Then she spoke. "The spirits may aid you, but their help comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it?" "What price?" Zera asked, her voice steady. The shaman met her gaze, her eyes filled with something dark and foreboding. "You will know when the time comes. But be warned, Queen Zera, some battles are not meant to be fought. And some victories are not worth the cost." The day of the battle arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. The Amazon warriors stood ready on the riverbank, their weapons gleaming in the morning sun. Across the water, the surface began to ripple as the Taimana emerged, their scales shimmering in the light. Zera stepped forward, her spear raised high. This is your last chance, Taimana. Leave this river in peace, and we will do the same. Nyla floated just above the water surface, her eyes cold and determined. We cannot. This river is our home, just as it is yours. But it is dying because of you. We will not allow that. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a sudden cry, the Amazons charged, their spears cutting through the air. The mermaids responded in kind, the water rising in great waves as they called upon the power of the river. The battle had begun. The clash between the Amazon tribes and the mermaids was fierce and unrelenting. The Amazons, skilled in land combat, used the jungle to their advantage, striking from the trees and the shadows. But the mermaids had control of the river, and with each wave they summoned, the battlefield shifted in their favor. Zera fought with the strength of a lioness, her spear striking through time and time again. But for every mermaid she felled, more rose from the depths, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light. Beside her, Kyra fought with equal ferocity, her movement swift and deadly. But as the battle raged on, something began to change. The river, once a source of life and power, started to churn with a dark, unnatural force. The water grew colder, and strange shadows began to stir beneath the surface. Nyla, locked in combat with Zera, felt it first. A chill ran down her spine as she sensed the presence of something ancient and malevolent. The Guardian's warning echoed in her mind. Beware the deep. Zera noticed it too. The once clear waters of the river were turning dark, the surface swirling with an ominous energy. She paused, breathing heavily, her spear raised, eyes scanning the battlefield. For a brief moment, both sides hesitated, sensing something was terribly wrong. What is this? Zera muttered, her grip tightening on her spear. Nyla backed away, her face pale as she gazed at the river. No. It can't be. Suddenly, the river exploded upward in a torrent of black water. From its depths emerged a massive creature, its form dark and twisted. It had the body of a serpent, with scales as black as night and eyes glowing a sickly green. The creature roared, sending shockwaves through the water and land alike. The Amazon warriors and the mermaids alike were thrown into chaos, their battle forgotten in the face of this new threat. The creature lashed out with its massive tail, sending waves crashing onto the shore, dragging both Amazon warriors and mermaids into the water. Zera staggered backward, her eyes wide with shock. What is that thing? Nyla's face was stricken with terror. The darkness. It's an ancient force. It was sealed beneath the river eons ago, but our battle must have awakened it. The serpent-like creature towered over them, its dark form riding as it began to move toward the land. Its presence seemed to corrupt everything it touched, the trees along the riverbank withered and died, and the once vibrant water turned black as it spread. We have to stop it. Zera shouted, snapping back to her senses. If that thing escapes the river, it will destroy everything. But how? She looked to Nyla, realizing they were no longer enemies, at least not in this moment. The Taimana and the Amazons were facing a threat greater than either of them could handle alone. Nyla met her gaze and nodded, understanding the unspoken message. We need to work together, she said, though the words felt foreign in her mouth. The Taimana can summon the currents to trap it, but we'll need your warriors to drive it back into the river. Zera nodded. We will fight side by side, then. But if we survive this, we will finish our war later. Agreed, Nyla replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. The battle between the Amazons and the Taimana transformed into a desperate struggle to contain the ancient serpent. The once bitter enemies now fought as allies, their differences set aside in the face of a greater danger. Zera led her warriors with a renewed sense of purpose, coordinating their attacks with precision. They struck at the serpent's massive form with their spears, trying to drive it back toward the river. But the creature was too powerful, its dark energy overwhelming. Nyla and her fellow mermaids used their control over the water to create powerful currents, trying to trap the serpent in the river. But the creature fought back, summoning whirlpools and waves of dark water that disrupted their magic. As the battle raged on, Kyra found herself face to face with the serpent. It roared, its massive jaws snapping toward her, but she dodged just in time, rolling to the side and plunging her spear into its side. The creature let out a deafening screech, writhing in pain. But Kyra wasn't fast enough. The serpent's tail lashed out, knocking her off her feet and sending her crashing into the river. Zera's heart froze as she watched her sister disappear beneath the dark waters. "Kyra!" Zera screamed, her voice breaking as she ran toward the riverbank. But before she could reach the water, Nyla appeared beside her. "Let me," Nyla said, and without waiting for a response, she dove into the water. Beneath the surface, the water was cold and suffocating, filled with swirling darkness. Nyla moved swiftly, her powerful tail propelling her deeper into the depths. She could feel the pull of the ancient serpent's energy, its darkness seeping into the river like poison. But then she saw Kyra, sinking slowly into the blackness, her body limp and unmoving. Without hesitation, Nyla wrapped her arms around the Amazon warrior and began to swim back to the surface. The darkness pressed in on her, making it difficult to move, but she pushed forward, refusing to let the river claim Kyra's life. When they finally broke the surface, Zera was there, pulling her sister onto the riverbank. Nyla helped as best she could, her breathing labored from the effort. Kyra was unconscious, but alive. Zera held her sister tightly, relief flooding her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Nyla nodded, her eyes softening for just a moment. But there was no time to rest. The serpent still raged, thrashing wildly in the river and on the banks. Its massive form began to encroach on the Amazon village, uprooting trees and tearing apart the earth as it advanced. The air was thick with the scent of decay and death, and the land itself seemed to tremble in fear of the ancient force. Zera stood, her eyes blazing with fury. "This ends now," she shouted, rallying her warriors. The Amazons, though battered and bruised, stood beside her, ready to follow their queen into what seemed like an impossible battle. "We cannot let that creature reach our home. If we fail, everything we love will be destroyed." Nyla, floating in the river beside Zera, called out to her mermaids. "Taimana! Summon all your strength. We must bind this creature to the depths once more." The two leaders, once enemies, now united in purpose, prepared for their final stand. Zera raised her spear high, and with a battle cry that echoed through the jungle, she charged toward the serpent. Her warriors followed, their spears gleaming in the fading sunlight, their determination unshakable. Nyla and the Taimana gathered in the river, their voices rising in a haunting, melodic chant. They called upon the ancient power of the river, summoning currents stronger than any they had ever controlled before. The waters began to churn and rise, swirling around the serpent like a cage. The creature roared in fury, thrashing wildly as it felt the pull of the river's magic. It fought with all its might, but the Taimana were relentless, their control over the water absolute. Slowly, the serpent was dragged back toward the depths, its dark form being enveloped by the powerful currents. But it wasn't enough. The serpent's strength was immense, and for every inch it was pulled into the river, it fought back with equal force. Zera and her warriors continued to strike at the creature, their spears piercing its hide, but it was not enough to bring it down. Desperation clawed at Zera's heart. She looked around, seeing her warriors struggling, the mermaids pushing their magic to the brink, and Kyra lying unconscious on the riverbank. They needed more power, something greater than they could muster alone. Then, as if answering her unspoken plea, the village shaman appeared at the edge of the battlefield. She stood tall, her weathered face illuminated by the glow of the darkened sky. Her eyes, clouded with age, were focused on the serpent, and her hands moved in intricate patterns, weaving symbols in the air. "The spirits have heard your call, Queen Zera," the shaman said, her voice carrying over the chaos. "But their aid comes at a cost." Zera met the shaman's gaze, understanding the gravity of what was being offered. The spirits were powerful, but they were not merciful. Their help would demand a sacrifice. "What must I do?" Zera asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil around her. The shaman stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the serpent. "The spirits will give you the power to bind the creature, to return it to the depths where it belongs. But in exchange, the Amazon tribe must give up its connection to the river. You will never again draw sustenance from these waters." Zera's heart clenched. The river had been the lifeblood of her people for generations. To sever their bond with it would be a loss beyond measure. But if they did nothing, the serpent would destroy everything, the village, the forest, and all the lives they had sworn to protect. "I accept," Zera said, her voice resolute. The shaman nodded solemnly. "Then call upon the spirits, and they will answer." With that, the shaman began to chant, her voice rising in harmony with the Taimana song. Zera closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She raised her spear to the sky, calling upon the ancient spirits of the jungle and the river. A sudden gust of wind swept through the battlefield, and the air crackled with energy. The ground trembled beneath Zera's feet as the spirits answered her call. The sky darkened, and a deep rumble echoed through the jungle as the power of the spirits surged through her. Zera felt the energy flood her body, filling her with strength beyond anything she had ever known. Her spear glowed with an ethereal light, and as she stepped forward, the serpent recoiled, sensing the new force that had entered the battlefield. With a roar, Zera hurled her spear, its light piercing through the serpent's dark form. The creature screamed, its body convulsing as the spear embedded itself deep within its chest. The spirit's power surged through the spear, binding the serpent to the earth. The Taimana, their magic strengthened by the spirits, called upon the river one last time. The water rose in a massive wave, crashing down upon the serpent and dragging it back into the depths. The creature thrashed and roared, but it could not break free. Slowly, the darkness began to recede. The serpent's form was swallowed by the river, its power fading as the water carried it away, sealing it once more beneath the surface. The jungle grew still, the river calm once again. Zera stood at the riverbank, her chest heaving with exhaustion. The spirit's power faded from her body, leaving her feeling drained but victorious. She looked out over the river, knowing that though they had won, the cost had been great. Nyla swam to the shore, her eyes meeting Zera's. "It is done," she said softly, her voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "The creature is sealed, but the river, it will never be the same." Zera nodded, her heart heavy. "Neither will we." The aftermath of the battle was marked by a quiet, somber peace. The Amazons and the Taimana had fought side by side to defeat a common enemy, but the wounds of their conflict still ran deep. The Amazons gathered at the riverbank, their eyes filled with sadness as they realized the full weight of their sacrifice. The river, once a source of life and sustenance, was now close to them. They could no longer fish its waters or draw from its strength. It was a loss that would reshape their way of life forever. But Queen Zera stood tall before her people, her voice strong as she addressed them. "We have faced great loss, but we have also gained something greater. We have protected our home, our future. And though we will no longer draw strength from the river, we will find new ways to thrive. We are Amazons, and we will endure." Her words resonated with her warriors, and though their hearts were heavy, they knew their queen spoke the truth. They would find a way to rebuild, to continue their lives despite the sacrifices they had made. Nyla and the Taimana returned to the depths of the river, They are born with the water unbroken but forever changed by the events of the battle. Nyla knew that the Taimana would never forget the day they fought beside the Amazons, nor the day they nearly lost their home to an ancient darkness. As the sun set over the jungle, Zera stood at the edge of the river, watching the water flow quietly once more. Beside her, Kyra stirred, finally waking from her unconscious state. She looked up at her sister, her voice groggy but determined. "Did we win?" Kyra asked, her eyes flicking to the river. Zera smiled faintly. "Yes. We won." But as she gazed out over the river, Zera knew that this victory, like all victories, had come at a cost. And though the war between the Amazons and the mermaids had ended, their story was far from over. Thus ended the war between the Amazon tribes and the mermaids, not in complete destruction but in a costly truce. The land and the river had forever changed, and the Amazons, though scarred, would continue to adapt and survive. As for the Taimana, they would remain in the depths, guardians of the river, always watchful for the next threat that might rise from the deep. The jungle would remember the battle, and the river would carry the story in its currents, a tale of enemies turned allies, of sacrifice, and of the eternal struggle to protect what one holds dear.
Amazon arrows shoot through the waves, mermaid scales shimmer where danger braves, war cries echo through the stormy skies, nature's fierce queens no compromise. Underwater tridents glimmer bright, forest spears gleam in the moonlight, two realms clash where the rivers run, body against tail till the war is done. Battle on the land and sea, fury fights under the canopy, mighty roars and waves collide, Amazon hearts and mermaid pride. Seaweed armors wrapped around fins, forest warriors with unyielding grins, tides swell as stream roots anchor fast, who will rise victorious and last? Battle on the land and sea, fury fights under the canopy, mighty roars and waves collide, Amazon hearts and mermaid pride. On the land and sea, fury fights under the canopy, mighty roars and waves collide, Amazon hearts and mermaid pride.